if we're honest, you don't have to convince anybody to try to do anything fast.
Yeah, I agree.
They'll just do it. But a lot of times they're doing it because it helps them get away with stuff, or they're trying to get through, they're trying to rush through it instead of actually be in it. So it does take a little bit more convincing to go slow motion. So it's not that going fast isn't great for you. It's just that it's only one end of the spectrum. You got all this other room that you can play in and learn from that actually will help you move faster when you do want to go fast.
That was Tim Anderson, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. If you're a coach looking for an awesome training portal to distribute and track workouts for athletes online or in person, then you can get a free 30-day trial of TeamBuilder software by heading to teambuilder.com and using the code JUSTFLY. See what TeamBuilder can do for you and sign up for that free trial today using the code JUSTFLY. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to welcome back to the show Tim Anderson. He is the co-founder of Original Strength. He's been a personal trainer for over 2 decades, is an accomplished author, and I've really enjoyed the past 2 episodes that Tim has been on this show, talking about crawling, rolling, and on the show today, we'll be discussing fluidity of movement, body tensioning, creativity, and Tim will be talking about utilizing a variety of speeds in training and offering that full spectrum effect to the movements and exercises that we do. This was an awesome chat, and I know you guys will love it. I certainly did. Let's get to episode 411 with Tim Anderson. Tim, welcome to the show, or welcome back to the show, I should say. It's fantastic to have you here, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the things I was just, in watching your videos, especially over the past year, I just really appreciate how you explore movement. Just like basic movements, I think a lot of people would go through and maybe just be like, all right, well, where do I put my hand or my feet? And tell me a little bit about just how you've come to appreciate and explore movement in a way that I just see you getting so much out of it, and it really resonates in your videos. So I'd be curious your process with just exploring maybe basic or advanced movements and how your learning has unfolded through that.
Honestly, I probably more luck than anything. I was definitely a straight A student, which means I was a rule follower. And so everything I did from exercise wise was pass fail. I wanted to do it just right. But that only got me so far. And a matter of fact, it didn't actually make me feel good because I don't know, you kind of get trapped. Anyway, when it came to learning about the body and how to press reset so that the body feels better, I just started showing up in curiosity, and I started wondering, well, what does it feel like if I do it this way? Or how does a movement feel if I just let my body do what it wants to do versus me trying to think how I should move my body? Like your brain can actually stop how you move. It can get in the way. So I guess I learned how to shut my brain up a little bit and just see what my body would do, and then try to evaluate how it felt.
Yeah, I know you've talked a lot about learning from movement just through watching children, like crawling and rolling and all those things. And I think watching animals is one of I'm sure you as well, but like that's something, I'll sit in my backyard. Like one of my favorite workplaces is just sitting on a chair in the backyard, and I'll see like squirrels and birds, and like just watching like a robin hunting for worms. I'm like, how do you know where the worms are? But like you could tell they're, that outer brain, that thinking brain is not holding them back from fluid movement. And it's thinking about, well, how did we end up in this predicament, And just how do you teach people to shake off those parts that are holding you back?
No, I have learned from watching animals, and you're right though. But so like a squirrel, they're just busy being a squirrel. They're not thinking about anything else, and they move so amazingly beautiful, right? So I guess that is kind of an inspiration to see, well, what happens if we actually let our brain get out of the way? And honestly, through watching kids, animals, and then just that self-exploration of not grading something as right or wrong, but just allowing whatever your moving base is, or wherever you're starting from, allowing that to be good. Like that's the good spot to start from. So there's no pressure on exploring movement after that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw it was actually one of your more recent videos, and I've I've been aware of this kind of like just basic practice for a while, but it was last year I went to a Evolve Move play retreat. Rafe Kelly's organization and Aaron Cantor, who's been on this podcast, was leading it, and we started with the warm up was starting with shaking, like just like basic up and down shaking the body, almost like you're shaking off the lines of tension. And I saw you
Yes.
had recently one of those videos. And I'm like, man, that is such an awesome way to do that. But I also think, some people are super into that. Like everyone who was at the Evolve Move Play seminar, we all look like a bunch of hippies shaking out in the park, and people probably look at it like, what are these guys doing? But like you have more people coming in for expecting, kind of like I said, more typical, like check the box type stuff. I'm curious how you would lead people, like what's a process of leading people into, especially you get, people come in and they move and everything's almost like people who's like their arms are like in front of them and they're like checking the box, like if they're skipping, kind of like a robot. Where do you start, or where does your thought process start with helping people to really tap into that reflexive nature of how we're meant to move?
Typically, if a person finds himself in front of me, they're already more open-minded for movement. So I guess if I were approaching a stranger that knew nothing about, movement or what I think about movement, I would try to open the door of use experience as the door opener. So no matter what their thoughts are, I would have them experience what I'm trying to get them to understand so that they can wrestle with it in their own mind and so that they can get out of their way versus me trying to convince them to get out of their way. And an easy example of that might be, Joel, let me see you touch your toes. Awesome. You can't touch your toes. Maybe you get to your kneecaps. That's great, though. That's great. But now I want you to do this movement. And we're going to bounce up and down, and we're going to try to shake the tension out of our muscles. That feels good, doesn't it? Yeah, okay, sure. Hey, let me see you touch your toes again. Oh my gosh, you just touched all the way down to your ankles. That is such a huge change just from shaking off that tension. Wasn't that neat? So I try to get them to experience what the movement does for their body or to their body so that they can appreciate it and wrestle with it and then be less guarded about it.
Yeah, and that's something that I had like later on in the questions, like the integration, like how do you take these things and then integrate them into like a lot of people's interests, obviously, especially with this podcast, like speed and power, sprinting and jumping and various things like that. But even just on the very basic level, just walking, jogging, moving. And I think that so oftentimes we look at it, all right, well, what are the boxes to check? But you don't, a lot of times that process, it's just a checklist and it never gets back to, well, what's the actual thing? I know one of the first times, like within Gary Ward's material, who's like really like feet, biomechanics, one of the things he always does after, at least in my experience, is after you do the work, go walk around. How does it feel? Like you have to always be integrating it versus I think it's easy to get caught up with almost too many checks in the box and you never get back to, well, how does your body feel? How does it move now? And then, like you said, that can create that buy-in as well. So it's almost like a continual process of do this, feel how it changes you. And then not only are you moving better, but you're also kind of more, you're experientially buying into the process as it unfolds.
Yeah. And you have to experience what it feels like to you so that you get that connection between your mind and your body. Otherwise, you're disconnected. And if you can't understand what your body's trying to tell you, you're going to miss out on a lot of good information and potentially a lot of information that can save you a lot of trouble, further down the line. But if you learn to be one with your body instead of, being disconnected from it and learn that it's part of you and that it's always giving you information just as much as you're giving it information, then you learn how to dance with it.
Yeah.
And then it's just a beautiful dance versus a very disjointed, disconnected, like train wreck kind of dance.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of, I saw that, you and Dan John have been doing some work together with like the kettlebell seminars, like Russian kettlebell. And even within those, I've heard Dan talk about like a kettlebell swing, like do a half swing, a quarter swing, like trying to find the feel of what feels reflexive and good. It's, and to me, like it does seem like the nature of the kettlebells, it's something swinging in space that you have to work with versus maybe like a power lift, that might not be there so much, or it's not there. But I'm curious, like in that context, like just to draw things or integrate things to a context of swinging kettlebells, what were some things that you, like what were some ways you could feed awareness of those movements that people are trying to do, like between sets or within those sets? I'd be curious of an example of how you might progress, or some of the concepts you were touching on there to help people integrate into kettlebell swings or high velocity movements.
Well, one way maybe, let's say you know how to do swings. All right. Well, do a set of two-handed kettlebell swings for 10 reps. Know what that feels like. You just did it. You know how hard it was. You know how much power you were producing. You know how hard it taxed your heart. You know how much effort you put into it, right? Especially if you're paying attention to it. Like, so I guess I should rephrase this. Perform a mindful set of 10 repetitions of kettlebell swings. All right, now after you've done that set, let's press reset. Let's get on the floor, rock back and forth on our hands and knees, or maybe let's do some segmental rolls. All right, after we've done that, now let's do another set of kettlebell swings and compare it to the first set that we just did. Is it faster? Is it smoother? Is it easier? Is it less effort? Is it less tension required? Are you moving better? So in that context, we can take an exercise and we can press reset after we perform the exercise, and then ideally, and more times than not, clean up the movement so that we can express more power, more speed, more fluidity, and therefore we're more efficient, and the movement's just easier.
Yeah, it reminds me, what you were saying just there, it reminds me of when I was in graduate school. So this was almost 20 years ago at this point. Not quite, but 15 plus. And I remember I was at Wisconsin Lacrosse. And one of the reasons I went there was they had an incredible track program, like huge storied history. And one of the warm-ups I always remember them doing quite often, I think they call it the Seagrave warm-up. I think it was named after Lawrence Seagrave. And I took this for granted at the time because when I'm 23, to me, it's just boxes to check, but I would see people doing like a set of lateral lunges. They do 10 each side, and then they go off into a sprint buildup for like 40 meters, like building up. Then they do a set of like air squats and then go build up. And then they do a set of forward lunges and build up. And then lying scorpions on the ground, like you're lying on your chest and your hands are to the side and your legs are doing like a scorpion. And I remember, to me, it didn't make sense, the integration at the time. But then I remember I would start doing it. And I always remember that scorpion exercise. Every time I did it, that buildup was just straight money afterwards. It felt so good, stride length unlocked. And that got me started with that, like, oh, like maybe you should do some things to integrate and search and see what works and how this feels good. And maybe almost like you said, though, too, not necessarily, I think if you went to a group of track athletes and you were like, all right, like you were very like, all right, you got to feel this and see how it goes. It's almost like just let it roll the first few times, and just see what comes up, compared to, like almost being heavy handed with the soft side of things, especially if it's like track practice. So I think, yeah, like you said, there's that art to it with how you actually communicate those things to the group in front of you.
Well, first of all, the reason the scorpion roll that was money for you is because it is actually a roll. It's a reset. So neurologically, that probably did more for your nervous system and your sprints than anything, right? Like, so that's a huge movement. But for track athletes, like you could do the same thing. So instead of thinking like kettlebell swings, think 60-meter dash.
Yeah.
All right, I want you to run 60-meter dash. Now walk back. Let's do a set of cross crawls. Now run that 60-meter dash again. Were you faster? Were you lighter? Were you more springy? Was it, you know what I mean? Like you can, even though you should be more tired, right? Like, so if I run 3 60-meter dashes, the second one should have more energy, or I should be able to produce a little bit more, get more out of my sprint in the second one than I did the third one, unless I'm doing something that restores and rejuvenates my nervous system afterwards, right? So you can get people's attention that way too. You can use the event or the movement itself, or like the sprint as the exercise to contrast and compare also.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's where, like, I love complex training with like a lot of, not necessarily a lot, maybe it's just 2, but like 2 exercises stacked together. And I think so often all that stuff is only looked at like one way. You could look at like the hard and soft or masculine, feminine, or whatever terms you want to use. But a typical coaching session might be, all right, you're going to run 460s and you rest in between, adequate rest to run them well. But then it's like there's a coach, you're running them fast and it's like coach. So it's all like either instruction and max effort versus like, well, hey, let's put some other things in between and just feel what those did, feel how that shows up versus everything being almost just pure informational in the way that, I mean, it's all information. It's a bad choice of words, but yeah, you know what I'm saying.
No, it is. And that's part of the art of coaching too, right? Like, cause you're trying to help them perform better, but at the same time, you don't want them to be mindless and just running through the motions, right? Because you actually do want them to perform better from the inside out. Like you're trying to not just build their skill, but build them, right? So to teach them how to feel their body and to learn from their body and to, oh, this drill is the one that makes me fast. And if they know that, right, now you've built their confidence. And now you've got more of an unstoppable athlete. A confident athlete's a dangerous athlete, right? Like, so if you give them the tools to know how to prime their body for its optimal performance, not only are they going to perform better physically, they're going to perform better mentally. And when you put those two together, that is a strong athlete.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. With the complex, what I was going to say too is with the work you're doing, and I don't want to get into like the beautiful strength and slowing things down. And with the complexes, a lot of times those complexes are also, it's all only fast and explosive things. I've gotten the habit of putting in, like sneaking in something that's, okay, maybe it's instead of single leg line hops as fast as possible, it's single leg line hops to the beat of whatever song's on. You know, like just sneaking in these little things that kind of attune the body. And I find that it's nice to have something in there that's not like full go. That's something in there that does slow things down enough to bring a level of attunement in versus just our default setting is, if we're going to go train strength or go train speed, well, it's all that, every single thing. And I think that there's a ratio, like, you know, versus like if it's just feeling good, maybe there's more feel good things in there. But I think there should be at least some space, even if it's a pure speed workout where and maybe it's just the warm up, but yeah, maybe it's in between sets and some opportunity to find that thing that feels good for you.
No, absolutely. And I think that's genius doing like stuff to rhythm and cadence, right? Because the brain, the nervous system loves that type of stuff. And again, it takes down it just removes the layers of tension and any restrictions that the nervous system may be guarding the body with. It just lets the athlete become more free to move fluidly, but also explosively.
Yeah. Speaking of rhythm and cadence, do you do any like crawl work to a rhythm? Like if it's, I'd be curious because I love doing like, groundwork to rhythms and cadences and beats. I'd be curious what your experience is with those, like in the realm of crawling or beyond, anything else.
So yes, sometimes, but like, so I'm a 90s hip hop R&B. I'm truly a 90s R&B fan. Best music ever. But so I will crawl, march, skip, or whatever to R&B music. It's stupid, awesome. But it's awesome. Fun.
That's awesome. I mean, it does kind of think like speeds, like even like the speed of like teaching, talking, moving. Like it seems like you're such a, like, I just sense this, like it's smooth, wise, grounded, you know, like your pace, you know, versus like someone else is just like, you know, hyper fast or something like that. It does seem like that's a good home base, especially just to feel good, you know?
So what's funny is like on the weekends, if I'm in the studio by myself, I'm by myself. So I'm playing like Keith Sweat, which is straight early 90s. But when people walk into the gym and they hear Keith Sweat, they're like, they all roll their eyes. They're like, what's going on?
Oh man, maybe it's for like the ultimate, I guess, recovery day. Like you know, it's like different. In my time training with Paul Cater, he's been on this podcast, uses like in the athletic performance realm, uses a lot of different like sets of music for whatever's going on. Like if it's like the more powerlifting at the end of the session, it turns into metal. If it's speed training, it's a little bit more like rap type or EDM cadences, or warm up especially is like EDM and type thing. So it's interesting for that. But I feel like the ultimate recovery day might just be an R&B. Maybe like a classical R&B type mix, because you won't be tempted to to make the system go too fast on that type of day.
That's right.
I feel like you haven't really experienced the full spectrum of training probably until someone's trained with you to Keith Sweat or something. You know,
there you go. If you haven't rolled on the floor or rocked around the Keith Sweat, you're missing out.
um, yeah, I'd love to get into, like the beautiful strength videos you have. I really enjoyed those. And one thing, and I think you've probably mentioned this in the other podcasts we've done, but like just slowing things down. And I'd be curious, is there like movements that are like linchpins to slow things down too, to help feel things out? Tell me a little bit about that process and how it could be applied in like a warm up or even just strength in and of itself, slow tempo work with strength.
So I'm a huge fan of exploring slow motion in movements. Now I do primarily do that like during pressing reset, like say for crawls or rolls or rocks. But you can do it with any movement whatsoever. And the beautiful thing about going slow though is that it teaches you so much about your body, but it also exposes the areas of your movement that you don't really have control of yet. But just by exposing yourself to those areas, that's where you start to dial in the control. So it's like the spotlight, but also the answer, to the issue. Like it'll show you your weaknesses, but it also is the actual thing that will strengthen those weaknesses as well. So by going slow, you learn so much about your body, but you also gain full control over every facet, nook and cranny of your movement. And Sugar Ray Leonard, like he was lightning fast, but he would also do super slow shadow boxing to like where like a trick photography, slow motion, you can't see him moving. And he was filling in the gaps, so that his speed there were no hitches in his speed. If he hit you, you knew it. So it's not a new idea. It's something that like the athletes have been doing forever. But it is a fantastic way though to learn from your body, but also to learn how to control your body.
I feel like it's one of those things where in the modern age, like, and I think, just to get attention, it's like novelty in exercises. Which way turns can you make this exercise go? But at the same time, looking at what people have done for centuries or millennia is just taking something basic and just doing it at different speeds. Like you said, like, hey, let's just do boxing and just do it at a different speed. Go slow it down. Or Bobby White, who works with basketball and then athletic performance in general, talks about actually taking the velocity higher for skills, like that side of the spectrum, to try to solve a problem with more speed. And I just think there's so much there that is, and it just takes, the time and to get, it's more awareness, especially the slow. It's like, it's almost like the slow is an internal awareness and the faster is almost an external. Your outside perception has to speed up, but it all has awareness to it. And I think it's an ingredient that's very easily missed, especially where I think it's just so easy to be inundated with just exercises. But like first, well, hey, let's take some basic things and let's experience them in so many different ways before we get carried away with, well, what's the new exercise I can do? I mean, not that stuff is, I think that stuff's cool. There's always room for novelty, but I think it's almost like the home base of the pyramid is have you gone slow? Have you gone fast? Can you do this to a rhythm? And all those things.
Yeah. And like, so the spectrum of speed, it's important to be able to do all of it. But, if we're honest, you don't have to convince anybody to try to do anything fast.
Yeah, I agree.
They'll just do it. But a lot of times they're doing it because it helps them get away with stuff, or they're trying to get through, they're trying to rush through it instead of actually be in it. So it does take a little bit more convincing to go to slow motion. So it's not that going fast isn't great for you. It's just that it's only one end of the spectrum. You got all this other room that you can play in and learn from that actually will help you move faster when you do want to go fast.
Yeah, I think you mentioned like the brain and rhythm. I'm sure there's something good with the brain as well when you slow things down to that point. And I totally agree with the skipping over points. Like you'll compensate around that little spot that you weren't great at. Or even the other day I was doing just like tall and then like tall kneeling water bag, just like water bag circles around my head. And as kind of like we were talking about before, like almost an interim between other stuff I was doing that was more speed based. But I always noticed that when I would go around the top, like my jaw and neck would clench up. And it's like a thing where, I don't know, it takes, I think I wouldn't have noticed that necessarily like 10 or 20 years ago. Maybe it's just a product of a little bit of experience as well. But it's like that was kind of the slow thing in between the fast things. But by going slow enough that I could clear that, at least, when it's going in that little window over my head, learned to relax, I felt that same relaxation show up in all the dynamic work after, which was amazing. And so it's like, there's such an important place for some of these things. And I wouldn't say that wasn't super slow motion, but it was slow enough that I could at least be aware of it. It's like just slow enough to have that new layer, and then you could take it with you into whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, but you also gave yourself the opportunity to become curious with what you noticed, and then you explored that as well. Right? Like, so going that slow, like it really opened a bigger door for you than just going slow itself.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Lila Exogen Wearable Resistance. Exogen is used by coaches such as Randy Huntington and Chris Corfist, and is an incredible tool in overloading the angular momentum and speed aspect of human movement. You can get 25% off of Exogen sleeves by heading to lilateam.com and using the code JustFly25. Today's podcast is sponsored by my favorite jump testing and training device, the Plyomat. If you want a jump mat that can not only get standard counter movement jumps and reactive jumps, but also is something you can put into your standard plyometric training, such as hurdle hops and bounds, to gather not only height, but reactive strength, contact time, and add that extra dynamic to your total training session, then check out the Plyomat, and you can head to plyomat.net, that's plyomat.net, to learn more. Yeah, I think even with like the strength, there's like the movement, even the strength piece, I think like people talk about, well, what's the value in a slow, like eccentric and squats for an athlete when, well, the force production isn't the highest or whatever, whatever. But I think there's so much going on. Just there's other, I think, neurological control pieces that go on that are really good for athletes. Like I remember working with swimming at Cal, I had a phase, the intro phase was always slow, like 3 seconds up, 3 seconds down, like, deadlifts or squats or RDLs, hinge patterns and all that stuff, 5 up, 5 down. And it wasn't intense. And the funny thing is, and I know there was stuff going on in the pool too that was different, versus like when stuff got really intense in the pool. But I remember that I had a really elastic athlete, and there was a few athletes like this who actually their vertical jump was really good at the end of that phase. And then actually we would get more intense and it would actually take a little dip. And again, the pool may have changed as well. And then it would come back up later. But I always thought to myself, wow, we're going really slow. And it is standing vertical too, so it does fit with like a slower skill versus like jumping off the run or maximal sprinting. But I did start to make some connections there that for some of these athletes, that control piece, we always look at it just, it's just force and just go do, the max sprints on full recovery. And people can be successful there. But again, it was kind of one of those things that helped me to realize the cracks, and there is value to going in the cracks, and maybe not all the time, but at least stepping into that place every now and then.
No, once in a while. And the other thing it can do for you is, like, if you're going super slow under load, like what you're talking about, well, now you've got time under tension, right?
Yeah.
Well, typically that's quite miserable. and it can make the mind really uncomfortable because you don't want to do it. So then it gets to be a test of your mental fortitude. So it's a way though to not just strengthen the body, you can also strengthen the mind. And again, you can't separate the two. So now if you get a stronger mind out of doing something that was physically miserable or that made you mentally miserable because it was physically challenging, then you're going to be better off anyway still.
Yeah. What is with the slow stuff in that? What's your experience with, do you do a lot of like isometric or just static work? Because I don't feel like I see that too often in your videos, but that's almost like the far.
Well, because those would be pictures.
Yeah, exactly. It would just be a picture.
I wouldn't need a video. It just look at this picture here and imagine I'm doing isometrics. It's just boring. But no, I do them. It's just that they don't make very good videos.
yeah. Just maybe one day you're just sitting there in like a crawl hold isometric instead of talking for 3 or 4 minutes. I think about that with like, it is more common. I think it's becoming more common in athletic performance, like ISO lunge holds and ISO push-ups and those kind of things. It is just a little more, it's just all shades of a spectrum, I guess, versus other slow movements.
And, everything's cyclical, right? So like 100 years ago, everybody was doing isometrics and it is coming back around again. But that's kind of the fitness world. And that's how we learn. We learn something, we do it, we forget about it, we move on. We learn something, we do it, we forget about it, we move on.
Within the art of coaching that too, I had this note written with either like almost isometric or really slow stuff. You had a quote, you're like, make sloths jealous. I thought that was really funny. Like, is that like the go-to for like, when with coaching people? I'm sure there's people who could just go way too fast. Like you say slow and you think they got it. and then they just keep, they're just blowing through stuff, like, is that like the go-to, or what's some other ways, or
It
that,
is.
to help people slow down and
I
notice?
so my two phrases that I try to use when I'm because I actually teach a class of slow motion, a small group class in slow motion, and the one is make sloths jealous. The other is if I can see you moving, you are not moving slow enough.
Nice.
So those are the two ways I try to get people to slow down.
Yeah.
As a consequence, people have bought me a lot of socks with sloths on them, a lot of coffee cups with sloths on them. So I've collected quite the sloth paraphernalia now.
Yeah. I like, I think about things to do, like youth soccer practice. You always think about things that resonate with kids. And I'm not, I wouldn't use it for like resistance training, but if it was like a crawl or something, I think it'd be kind of fun, or any movement, like even like walking or something, like you could get away with moving that slowly to see how kids process something like that. Like if I see you, like try to get to like 1 yard down the field, but if I see you move, I don't know, it'd be kind of funny to see how because they'd be kind of looking at you, and like it'd just be interesting to see how they kind of solve that type of movement problem.
So this is super stupid, but I learned. You know how you have an alarm system in your home and you can set it for away, like you're out of the house, and so there's a motion detector in your home. I learned that you can move slow enough where you don't set off the motion detector.
Nice. Yeah, that's a fun challenge. It's almost like some people see the speed limit, like on the other end, like some people see the police like radar that goes under the speed limit sign. It's like, you are going this fast. So the polar
Yeah,
opposite of that is don't set off the motion detector.
correct.
You could superset both of them, maybe like a marching drill, and then go and sprint as fast as you can.
That would be an interesting training session.
Yeah, it'd lead to some interesting connections. I wouldn't say do it all the time, but it'd certainly lead to some interesting, hopefully mental connections in the process.
For
Uh,
sure.
Um, well, with the beautiful strength piece, I know we talked about the slow motion. I'd be curious if there was anything else that goes into that, like just umbrella for you. With if you're looking at strength in that container, are there any other pieces there that you'd like to get into?
I think it would be yeah. So it's not beyond just moving slow. Is to kind of be curious to see where you can move.
Hmm.
Like a lot of times, your body will it'll give you barriers. A lot of people say, "Well, I can't move that way because I get stuck right here." Well, great. Like use that barrier to learn from it. So when it comes to like trying to develop your beautiful strength, if your hip won't allow you to do like a move a certain way in a shin box, move where your hip will allow you to move and get to the edge of your limitation, but learn how to move there.
Hmm.
Instead of avoiding it or just saying, well, I can't do that, or I'm stuck right here, get really acquainted with it. Like get it right up to the edge of it and learn where you can move and how much you can move in that area that your body's trying to not allow you to go. And in doing that, a lot of times is where you really learn how to move and you would learn your body.
Yeah, in a way that makes me think of like the corrective exercise space, and I think it's constantly changing and evolving. But there's some pushback on correctives now because there's some ways of issuing out correctives as your movement pattern is broken. Do this other movement pattern that's related, and we talked about this already, like with do things in between the main sets and see how it feels. But I feel like, and I'm not saying I think that can be used well, but I also think it can be misused. Like everyone is, oh, you're broken, do this, do this. I think there's like almost a wave of it, like good and then extreme. But how you're saying, it almost goes into it like experience how this works for you, and you're using the same movement basically to solve the problem, not a different movement, but you're in your own body doing the same movement, exploring the ranges, exploring the edges. And I just think that's something that we leave out of the whole corrective process.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I know correctives are well intentioned, but I think they can be dangerous or mismanaged because if you do start labeling people as broken, that's what they're going to, that's the program you've given them, and they're going to run the program. I mean, we are so programmable. So if somebody owns the idea that they're broken, they're going to own it,
Yeah.
and they're going to be very good at owning it, which means they're never going to get away from it, and they can't get out from under it because now they've been given the program and they're just carrying out the operating orders, right? So I don't like doing that. So that's why for in original strength, we say that everybody starts at good. Because like you already know this, a person if they have compensations or limitations, they are already moving exactly the way their body is designed because their brain is telling their body to move that way because it's not getting the information it's looking for. So they're not moving bad or wrong. They're doing exactly
Mm,
what their brain is telling them to do because it's working the way it's supposed to. So then in that sense, they're moving good. Now, how can we take good and get them to a better place? By giving their brain more information, the information that it's looking for to start removing those limitations and compensations. So they're not broken. They're actually working and operating perfectly the way they're supposed to. So then take advantage of that.
yeah.
And then that allows for curiosity. And then you can rub up against your limitations and learn from them. And then a lot of times when you do that, you've given your brain so much information that says, you know what? I don't need to guard and protect you here anymore. I'm going to let that go. And then the next thing you know, that limitation is gone. All because you weren't broken and because you got curious enough to give the brain the information it was looking for.
Yeah, I love that because honestly, it was just yesterday. Actually, I'm going to ask your advice here for the track and field coaching like piece I was working through is I coach high jump, and some high jumpers, like a good high jumper, can basically combine a takeoff with a little bit of a segmental roll because they have to twist in the air. And athletes who don't have the combination of a takeoff with a little bit of the roll they keep the shoulders a little bit more like a 2x4, and they kind of have to like compensate their way to back over the bar. And I had an athlete the other day, and I had just made this connection, is this athlete had very tight shoulders that didn't want to kind of like move back and forth very well with kind of like those spiraling figure eights or however you want to call it. And so how her strategy went was just to kind of move over the bar more or less kind of like a 2x4 and kind of force the arch and take off. And I noticed that, and I had her doing some shoulder rolls and some, just various movements. But something bothered me after the practice because I'm like, I think I labeled, like you said, I was like, oh, your shoulders are tight. And that's why you're not, able to hit the takeoff well. And I was like, I think I could have constructed that whole sequence better because I think we were doing things that were helpful. But like you said, as soon as like, oh, well, you have tight shoulders, it just, there's something that I'm always thinking about being more careful with that type of piece. So I'm kind of like, all right, well, Tim, if you had someone who had those tight shoulders, I'd be curious how, a sequence of how you might go it versus, and I think you just mentioned it too, but maybe as a practical example, like how would you go through that with an individual who had that and then helping them to explore that?
So just keep in mind, you've given me a bird's eye view and I'm not in it like you are in it.
Oh, yes, of course.
And we're always doing the best that we can, right? However, with the bird's eye view, it might be like now we get to have the creativity to explore, right? So we can say, you know what? You are really good at doing it the way you do it.
Yeah.
So like reinforce that the way you're doing it, you're really good at doing it that way. I wonder if we can teach you how to do it more segmentally or more fluid or more, with more rotation.
Yeah.
And then go over the shoulder drills and stuff.
Yeah.
It just, but it's always, and like, I'm sure you still did it so encouraging, right? But to just more affirm that, hey, what you're doing, you're rock solid at doing it that way. Let's see if we can get more rotation in you by learning some new drills and then see how it translates or, transfers over to the jump.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And I totally get it too. Cause like you're not seeing it, like you're seeing it from your perspective. You're not there at practice, obviously, but you're totally right with like, I love that. I just go back to everybody starts it good. And it's almost like if you can start that conversation, whatever it is, whatever the thing is that needs to be cleared up, it's like you're solving the problem in an incredible way with what you have right now. Like maybe we can put this little piece in your awareness and let's see how you now solve the problem with that in your awareness, and like, I love like Jay Schrader, who is the coach who got I think he's started the modern like extreme isometric holds train, and he would take training from a very just like almost a machine like perspective, and then let the athlete be the athlete in their sport. But he always talked about the body as a miracle. It's like you are a miracle, and I think about just how we solve movement problems and just the level of control in the nervous system and all the peripheral stuff, and just watching out. I'm like, this is so amazing, and to give athletes almost that thought of you're anything but that. You have anything but that ability. Yeah, I do think you could start to, like you said, you can start to think of yourself as a different way. So to start, I just love that everybody starts it good. Like if we just starting with that, like that's something I'll definitely keep in my memory banks. I love like make sloths feel slow and everybody starts it good. Those are two things I have written down I think are great.
That's awesome.
So yeah, what you mentioned, like the learning, like the teaching, or the just like the love for curiosity and exploration. And and then slow motion we covered. One thing I hear you talk about a lot, and I don't know if it would fit, if it was in that video series, but you seem to always have a priority on what feels good. And I think it probably goes with those things, because I think so often, like you said, it's the checklist. It's all right, do these things. It's like, well, hit these positions or whatever, and do the movement this way. But there's not really well, did that feel good? Like, or how smooth can I make this feel? How good can this feel? Tell me a little bit about like what, how would a session, maybe a way to craft the question would be, how does a session unfold in terms of a ratio, maybe of like feeling, like cultivating a feel versus like the meat and the potatoes, if that makes sense, because I think there's always maybe there's a harmony to it. But yeah, anything you want to talk about on that, the level of feel good work.
In general, so it's going to be a little bit different from person to person, but if I am just looking at like helping a person discover that they're not stuck in their body, like most of us know what it is like to not feel good, which is actually a good thing, because then we know it actually, I mean, when you realize it feels good to feel good, like that's a no-brainer, right? Because you know what it's like to feel bad. So from just a regular person, a non-athlete, a life athlete, and, somebody just trying to navigate their way through life, I would try to structure it as, hey, let's show up every day, and if not every day, as often as we absolutely possibly can. And let's just start with something simple. Give me 10 minutes a day, every day. Let's start there, because I guarantee you, if you give me 10 minutes of movement every day, in a year, you've given me 3,650 minutes of movement, and you have built a very efficient nervous system with all the neural pathways needed for those movements to give you complete access to your body with no tension, no fear, no reservation, no limitation. And that's crazy, but it all adds up, because your nervous system is built off of repetition. So we can take it we don't have to be in a rate or hurry. We can start out so slow and simple and just accumulate 10 minutes a day, every day. And we can make it even simpler than that. Say, hey, for 2 minutes, I want you to practice belly breathing. Then for 2 minutes, I want you to practice moving your eyes and your head. Then for 2 minutes, I want you to practice rolling on the floor. Then for 2 minutes, I want you to practice rocking back and forth on your hands and knees. And then for 2 minutes, I want you to practice crawling on your hands and knees like a child does. So now we've taken that 10 minutes and we've made 2-minute segments out of it. So you don't get, time flies by. You don't get bored doing it. You actually, and if you spend any time doing this by like day 20, day 10, 15, day 30, you're going to already feel great. But you're also now going to start exploring the motions more, because now you're going to get out of the checking the box mode, because you realize you feel better. And then you accidentally stumble across different ways to roll, different ways to crawl, different ways to move your eyes and your head. And then 2 minutes becomes like, well, dang, I did 10 whole minutes of just rolling today. And maybe later in the day, you want to do another 5 minutes of rocking. Like, so it just starts to accumulate in the person where they'll give you more. But it starts from just showing up a little bit every single day. So that would be for my life athlete. For my collegiate athlete or professional or high school athlete, I'm going to do that same thing, but I'm going to do it at the beginning of the training session. Hey, we're going to take the first 10 minutes and we're going to press reset and give your nervous system everything it's looking for, so that it takes all the brakes off your body. We're going to remove all your compensations right now, get all the tension out of your body. No fear being held in your muscles, so that you can express yourself with full fluidity and explosiveness. So every session is going to start out that way. And then if it's a weight room session, we're going to marry the exercise with the reset, because we're going to, after we tire the nervous system down, we're going to refresh it.
Yeah.
So that we can get more out of them in the session, and we can minimize their chance of getting hurt and injured. And if it's on the field, like say they're practicing routes for a football player, or they're practicing the curve on the track. They're running the 200 and they're just practicing coming out of the curve. All right. Every time we do that, we're going to press reset. We're going to do some cross crawls. We're going to walk a certain way. Maybe we're going to march. Maybe we're going to just stand here and hold our tongue in a certain position and breathe a certain way. So that when you do the next one, you're faster, stronger, more explosive.
Yeah. I like thinking of it kind of like a song, or like an EDM song. Like a good song, it's not just the bass drop the whole time. That would get old. Like there's like little like smaller pieces that are like buildups in between. And then you have, and maybe sometimes that buildup is just resting there, but there's a lot of other cool stuff that you can put in as well. And you
Absolutely.
said something, I just figured this out maybe 3-4 years ago. And I love what you said about just like, it's almost like how you do everything and how your body processes. I mean, this is something where I took it like if you don't move well and your base one isn't trying to feel good at some point, I think it's very possible to do everything with kind of almost like this, like kind of stiffness, this overcoming intensity. I remember I was doing some filming for, I think it was the Speed Strength book I wrote back in 2018. And it was like a depth jump exercise. And I was looking at the pictures of myself doing it. And I was like, man, I have like so much tension in my jaw and my neck. And I was like, I don't think I was like that at 16 or 17. When did that creep in? And then when I was 35 years old, I kind of just hit the wall with recovery. Like I couldn't recover from any workouts well. I mean, I know, getting older, you have kids and you have things I know that all feeds in, but I've had these realizations of, I think so much of how well you recover workout to workout is also, well, what was the tension in your body like throughout that whole workout? How did you process that? Like, and back to like the tensing the face example, like how well would you recover from a sprint workout? Let's say you're doing, 4x60 meters where you really have a lot of extra tension versus 4x60 where you had less. Like, I mean, you need some tension obviously somewhere to run well. You can't just be totally loosey-goosey, but the unneeded tension was gone and your strain energy was decreased. And there was just more of that time to feel good. And so I've really been thinking about that lately, is how do you as a total human being process each workout? And that's where like you said, like how do you, even like how do you walk between exercises like sprints? I realize like, if you're like kind of stiff and tight and you walk stiff and tight between your sprints, I don't think it's going to be as good of an experience. And if you I like watching like, how does Usain Bolt walk around between his sprints? Like kind of loosey-goosey and just there's like this chillness to it. I think even that's a frequency between the brainstem hits. If you can just walk around with that kind of chill vibe, and just relax. And yeah, I think there's so much there.
That's the total Bruce Lee move, like water, be like water, right?
Yeah.
So you've actually raised an interesting question. Like, are young people move so well because they're fast and explosive because they have like more hormonal cascade to provide for this, and they're not old yet? Or is it just because they don't have a lot of stress in their lives and they're not holding all this extra tension in their muscles and their nervous system, causing rigidity and like robot-like movements?
Yeah.
So, and maybe it's a combination, but I think the tension idea that you're posing is like that has a lot to do with it, has a big deal in how we end up being able to move and express ourselves.
Yeah. Watching children, like just last night, my son had soccer practice. He's 5, and then they'll run all through soccer practice, all charged up, having fun. And then they go to the playground after and are running all over the place, having fun. And it's like, there's this combination of, and as long as I've been coaching youth soccer, it's not like they're doing conditioning on the side or anything to build up the aerobic engine. Everything is driven by fun and joy and also like a sense of wonder, like even games they come up with on the playground. And I think that all kind of works together. It's like, I think about this too, and I watch my children grow older. I wonder what age we start to lose, some of those things, and then how that feeds into the movement equation. And then it's almost like you get older and you have to learn to put it back into place. Like I know that's been my journey, and how that fits with your recovery and just how much work you can do or how much movement you do in a given day, and just how it all adds up and feeds together.
Children have the secret, man. Fun's invigorating. It'll let you go all day, but when it's work, it's not invigorating anymore.
Yeah, there's definitely like a different process to that. And yeah, even when it's work, I almost feel like, there's a process of like letting, you almost have two paths. You can almost like grind harder, or you can keep moving, but you almost try to like let go the tension and just kind of go with the thing that's driving you.
Yeah.
It's
Learn
kind
how
of,
to let go and learn how to smile, and then works a little bit easier.
yeah, without question. So actually, that was one of the things the last questions are rounding down that I had for you was longevity. And yeah, I think we just touched on a lot of it. But any thoughts on maybe like, changing shifts? I guess you could say, well, I'm going to go from powerlifting to dumbbell. That's just such a generalized version, because I think you could still do powerlifting or whatever your movement practice and still be youthful and invigorated. I don't think it
Yeah.
has to do with that. But any thoughts on like a longevity movement practice, like things to keep in the system to keep yourself moving well? And I'm sure we've talked about it already, but I've seen you also do videos with longevity in mind and those types of youthful movement practices. So if you have any thoughts there, I'd be that we haven't talked on, or to build on anything we've talked on already, I'd definitely be
Yeah.
interested.
I think one of the fountains of youth, beyond, that 10-minute reset idea I gave you every day, one of the beautiful things about that is that it gets you on the floor.
Hmm.
So when we were children, we got strong by being on the floor. When we're adults, we can stay strong by being on the floor.
Hmm.
Like, if we're very familiar and comfortable with getting up and down from the floor, statistically, we're going to live a lot longer. There's just too much research out there, which it should be a no brainer. But anyway, so if I'm looking at longevity, I'm going to say every day, spend some time on the floor, learn how to move your body on the floor, just the same way you did when you were a child, because that is what made you strong and resilient as a child. That is what will make you strong and resilient as an adult, which will improve the quality and quantity of your life. The other thing would be to take walks. We're made to walk, and walking is the movement that is designed to keep our brain tied together, to keep our brain healthy, to keep our body tied together. And it sounds crazy, but walking is not just walking. Walking is your fountain of youth. It is what your body is designed to do. And if the body does what it's designed to do, it's going to be healthy. Conversely, if the body doesn't get the chance to do what it's designed to do, it's going to break down, wear out, and become frail and fragile very, very fast. So spend some time on the ground, take walks every single day as much as possible, and then practice your springs, whether it's that silly movement you were talking about at the beginning of gentle bouncing, whether it's like, when you go out for walks in the neighborhood, you practice jumping up and down off curbs like you did when you were a kid, or
Yeah.
play hopscotch. Just playing hopscotch as an adult will keep the elasticity and the bounce in your body. And that is what you need to stay young.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love, yeah, even nowadays when I go running in like a trail with a creek and there's like logs and stuff. And if you view it as like a chance to play versus like, hey, I got to go run and, check off this distance. Oh, it's the difference. You're even just every movement, your body like connected and responsive. And even like just kind of taking time to feel how your foot like hits the rock and feel how your body snaps. Oh, it's like, it's the best. And yeah, my area that I run into, it had like a couple, I mean, there's a lot of erosion there. And there was a few trees that fell, which I'm always like kind of sad to see the erosion in the area. But I'm like, well, I have this new log to play on now. And, it's just finding new ways to jump off it. It really does make, viewing it as a chance for that has been a total game changer. I did want to ask you, this is like, I had written this down and I was going to save it till the end because we started with this, but talk about the shaking and how do you get people to do it? But I feel like almost like the level 10 shake, you had like something called Flappy Bird. You tell me about Flappy Bird? Because I was going to try it, but tell a little bit about like the different shaking and then the Flappy Bird shake.
So one, it was just, bouncing up and down, letting your heels hit the ground, staying on the balls of your feet. You don't have to leave the ground. You just create vibration from like rapidly going up on your toes down, and it's gentle. You can leave the ground and just, barely a couple of millimeters off the ground. And that's still gentle too, especially if you're using the balls of your feet, which is your spring system. It's a great way to use your springs, right? Your shock absorbers. Flappy Bird is literally imagining your arms or wings, and you're just trying to emulate what a bird looks like. And it can be in slow motion, it can be at regular speed. It's really cool though, because the body goes where the mind leads it. So if you imagine that when you're crawling, if you imagine what a cat looks like when you
Mm,
crawl, you will more look like a cat. If you imagine if you're trying to flap your arms like wings, if you imagine what a bird looks like what an eagle might look like when it's landing, from the
mm.
sky, you will more than likely move what your mind is seeing. Your body just figures it out, which gets to be such a neat way to experience movement. And I'll tell you what's really crazy is because I did that video with the Flappy Bird, and I did not know because when I'm doing it, all I see is what I see out of my eyeballs, right? So when I saw the video though, I was like, oh my gosh, look how much my rib cage and everything is moving. I was like, I
Yeah.
had no idea.
Wow.
so so I learned just by watching the video. I was like, oh, imagining a bird really does get a lot of good motion out there.
Yeah, it is so amazing, like just to see how the body pieces together movement. Like I was going back, actually, I don't know what kind of spurred this, but I have some videos of myself high jumping from like 20 years ago when I was in college. And just to think like I had such weird takeoff positions compared to normal, but it's just like it almost back to like, you start with good. Like I had people tell me to fix my takeoff but I mean, it was interesting how in the world I even made that takeoff work for myself and, to almost start with that. But I was, I don't want to get carried away with that piece because I did want to get to, I just wrote this down. It's almost like to create in a workout chances to sneak in analogies with animals. Like, and I do that
Yeah.
with warming up for kids. Like we'll warm up for soccer, be a cat, be a bear, be a snake or something. But even the bird with the wings is so fascinating. Darian Barr, who's a biomechanics and movement mentor I've learned so much from. He's spent hours just watching birds take off in slow motion. He talks about like the little flaps of the hands and the minute twists and flaps of the hands and
Yes.
sprinting and jumping. And like we were talking about before, I see a lot of athletes, track athletes especially, who their hands are almost stuck, like locked, like a robot, when there does need to be these little minute motions and little spirals and bends to control and work with the shoulders and the rib cage. And I'm like, I saw that Flappy Bird and I was like, that would be a cool thing for athletes who are kind of locked, and then based off what you're saying before, not like be like, oh, you're broken, let's do Flappy Bird. I don't know, let's just do Flappy Bird and then run and see what it feels like, or something like that. Or however we can build up the Flappy Bird. But I love that video. I'll definitely put it in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah, Tim, closing out, I know you have a new book out. Would you like to share a little bit about that before we end our call today?
Yes, thank you. It's called A Simple Book of Strength. This is my 10th book. It is probably my favorite book. The premise is right now, if you're listening to this, you have all the strength in your body that you'll ever need. In fact, you have all the strength that you want to have. You just may not have access to it. So this book is a guide to try to help you develop access to the strength that's already inside of you. Which is more than enough strength to live your life the way you want to live it. Anyway, that's the premise. It's a simple book of strength. It's available at anywhere you want to buy a book from.
Awesome. Oh, I love that. I know I'll definitely be getting that. That just reminds me too that everybody starts at good. Like you have the strength inside of you. It's just so empowering to know that, and then to just know like that you already have it, and just finding out how to express that. It's so powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is really neat. And most people, because this is gross and most people don't know it, but you have enough strength in your body. Like if you got electrocuted, your muscles can contract so strong that it breaks your own bones.
Yeah.
Well, that's more than enough strength than you'll ever need to do anything in your life that you want to do.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's really empowering. Yeah. To have that, knowledge. So, well, I love that, Tim. Well, Tim, there's so many good things. I just really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for your time and your knowledge, and I appreciate you being on.
Joel, thanks so much for having me, man. This was fun. I really appreciate you having me.
That finishes another episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.